All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Kent City Council meeting for November 17th, 2020. This is a remote meeting due to the emergency proclamation for COVID-19. A live broadcast is available of this meeting on Kent TV 21, our cable channel, as well as Facebook and YouTube. There is also a dial-in option for this evening's meeting. With that, Kim, will you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mayor Ralph?
Here.
Council President Troutner?
Here.
Councilmember Boyce?
Here.
Councilmember Fincher?
Here.
Councilmember Core?
Here.
Councilmember Larmer?
Here.
Councilmember Michaud?
Here.
Councilmember Thomas?
Here.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, Kim. With that, we'll move on to item number 3, which is the agenda approval. Are there changes to the agenda from staff or council?
Madam Mayor, one change. The mayor recommends council add an item 9B, an ordinance restricting app-based restaurant delivery and pickup fees.
All right, thank you. Any additional changes? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda with the one addition?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve the agenda with the addition added.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, next we're going to move on to public communications, and the first item is public recognition. I am very pleased to introduce Association of Washington City's CEO, Peter King, and he is here to provide some recognition to several of our council members. Good evening, Peter.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I think that someone has to put me back on video because I'm locked out, but okay, there we go. Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Mayor, Council President Troutner, members of the council. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you for a couple of minutes this evening. I think, like you, I'm getting pretty tired of Zoom. I recall that in the last fall, we were there at the Hydroplane Museum in Kent for one of our Cities on Tap events, and it was great to see many of you and others. So I'm looking forward to get back to that. I am here to present an advanced certificate of municipal leadership to Councilmember Core, but I do want to acknowledge that we have two other council members who recently received the basic CML, Councilmember Michaud and Council President Troutner both recently received the CML. Looking through our records, we also have Councilmember Fishner as the CML, and Mayor Ralph, you've got the advanced CML that you received back in 2008. So as a council, you're doing really well on participating in the program. A little bit of background on the program. The Certificate of Municipal Leadership offers all mayors and council members in our 281 cities an opportunity to gain knowledge and skills to operate within the law, to plan, to secure and manage funds, and foster community and staff relationships. There are 4 general areas that have been identified. The basic certificate started back in 1997, and that's the one, it's been around for about 25 years, and it requires 30 credits of study. The advanced certificate, which we're talking about this evening, was later added. It requires an additional 30 credits, and that can be done through AWC activities or non-AWC courses, plus a community service component. So as you serve on other boards or committees or state level boards, that goes toward that additional community service. Councilmember Core just finished serving on the AWC Equity Work Group, so that's an example of additional time that can go toward that community service. So over the period of time, over the years, about 1,100 mayors and council members have completed the basic certificate, and about 350 have completed the advanced. So on average, maybe a dozen city officials each year receive this award. All of the council members and mayors are automatically enrolled in the program, and any of you can go in and check the number of credits that you have so far. So we've continued to expand our online opportunities. A couple of years ago, it was because your time is very valuable, and we wanted to make sure that you could access content and information at your convenience, and certainly travel is difficult. With COVID, we accelerated all that work. Our annual conference this year was all online. If you haven't had a chance to go in, you can look at that content and earn up to 10 credits. And most of our workshops now are recorded and available to you online. In August, in 1 week, for example, we did a day-long session on budgeting. We had a 2-hour session on race, equity, and leadership. We had a CARES Act one. Last week, we did a 3-part series on homelessness. If you didn't have a chance to sit in on that, there's some excellent information that's available there. So there's lots of opportunities to gain 30 hours or 60 hours or just some general knowledge on things that you want to get some information on. So the advanced certificate acknowledges continued commitment to education and community service. So I am with you tonight to acknowledge and congratulate Councilmember Core for achieving the advanced CML. So on behalf of AWC President Sue Ing Moody, Mayor of TWISP, and the AWC Board of Directors, I extend my sincere congratulations to Councilmember Core for your achievement and dedication to continuing education on behalf of your community and for the citizens of Kent. So congratulations. And thank you very much for allowing me to have a few minutes with you this evening. And if there's anything AWC can do for any of you, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Peter. We really appreciate the leadership of AWC, especially through this trying time. The leadership, the education, the lobbying efforts on behalf of cities, it's something that we all value very much. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you.
All right, and congratulations again, Councilmember Core and Councilmember Michaud and Council President Troutner. It takes a lot of work, and I will tell you, very valuable information. I attended the 3-part series on homelessness this past week, and I took away a lot of very important things and questions to ask our city attorney for sure. So congratulations to everyone. All right, with that, we are going to move on this evening. We've got 3 proclamations tonight, and I will go ahead and read these. The first proclamation is for Arbor Day. We celebrated Arbor Day this past weekend out at Clark Lake Park. Councilmember Michaud and Council President Troutner were out for that event. We had a full slate of volunteers working in the park, and as I said to the volunteers on Saturday, it sure is nice to see people back outside in a COVID safe environment, working to help keep our parks, especially Clark Lake, in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas Arbor Day was established in 1872, and whereas the City of Kent recognizes the value of trees in making the city environmentally sound and aesthetically pleasing, which promotes good business and sense of community, and whereas the City of Kent established a tree ordinance and a tree maintenance crew for the purpose of maintaining, protecting, and regulating street trees for the beautification of the city. And whereas, in recognition of its commitment to trees and the environment, the City of Kent has been named Tree City USA by National Arbor Foundation every year since 2003, making this our 17th anniversary. And whereas the City of Kent continues to engage the community through annual volunteer events that beautify and conserve valuable trees and natural areas and parks. And whereas 2020 marks Kent's 130th year as an incorporated city. Now, therefore, I, Dana Ralph, Mayor of Kent, do hereby proclaim November 14th, 2020 as Arbor Day in the City of Kent. And I encourage all residents to consider planting a tree on their property, to take a moment to enjoy the trees in our local parks, to appreciate the beautiful green open space and forests that we enjoy here in the Northwest, and to join the environmental restoration efforts at Clark Lake Park. I want to also say thank you very much to our parks operations crew for setting those events up. It's definitely extra work in COVID, but I know that they wanted everyone to enjoy their time at the park and be safe and still be able to get some work done. So thank you so much to our parks crew for putting that together, and Francine in particular for leading that event. So thank you very, very much. All right. Our next proclamation was brought forward at the request of Councilmember Fincher. So I want to say thank you, Councilmember Fincher, for requesting this. I think it's a very important proclamation and am happy to present it tonight. So here's the proclamation. Whereas Native American Heritage Month is recognized annually to honor Indigenous cultures, histories, traditions, art, and achievements. And whereas in the face of broken treaties, violent displacement, and genocide, Native Americans have persevered and continued with remarkable strength, resistance, resilience, and self-determination. And whereas Native Americans, including local Duwamish and Muckleshoot, and many others, have been protectors and stewards of our natural resources and environment since time immemorial. And whereas the City of Kent values the many contributions made to society by Native people in technology, science, philosophy, the arts, and especially our local Indigenous volunteers and leaders. And whereas the City of Kent recognizes that we must work to combat the impacts of discrimination and racist policies on Native people, past and present, and eliminate inequities stemming from colonization. And whereas Native American Awareness Week began in 1976, and recognition was expanded by Congress and approved by President George Bush in August of 1990, designating the month of November as National American Indian Heritage Month. Now, therefore, I, Dana Ralph, the Mayor of Kent, do hereby proclaim November 2020 is Native American Indian Heritage Month in Kent, Washington, and encourage all residents, as well as our elected representatives, to recognize and commemorate the important contributions that Native American people have made in our country and our communities. Okay. All right, we have one more proclamation. I'm going to take a drink of water here. And this is around Small Business Saturday. So in the times of COVID, when especially our brick and mortar retailers are suffering more than ever from closures and restrictions, it's extremely important that as residents of Kent, we spend our dollars here in our city to help support our small businesses. This proclamation says, whereas the City of Kent celebrates our local businesses and the contributions that make our local economy and community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 31.7 million small businesses in the United States, representing 99.9% of all firms with paid employees in the United States, and are responsible for 65.1% of the net new jobs created from 2000 to 2019. And whereas small businesses employ 47.1% of employees in the private sector in the United States, 62% of U.S. small businesses reported that they need to see consumer spending return to pre-COVID levels by the end of 2020 in order to stay in business. 65% of U.S. small business owners said it would be most helpful for their businesses to have their regulars return and start making purchases again, and 3/4 of U.S. consumers are currently looking for ways to shop small and support their community. Whereas 6% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday agree that shopping at small, independently owned businesses support their commitment to making purchases that they have a positive social, economic, and environmental impact, and 97% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday agree that small businesses are essential to their community. Whereas the City of Kent supports our local businesses to create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities, and whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, I, Dana Ralph, Mayor of Kent, do hereby proclaim November 28th, 2020 as Small Business Saturday in the City of Kent, and urge our residents and the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday. So if you're out shopping, Black Friday is going to look very, very different this year for sure. But take the extra time to seek out a local business and support them. It really does matter, and they are the foundation of our communities. So here's to supporting our small businesses. With that, we are going to move on to community events. Council President Troutner, do you have any community?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just want to remind everyone that we have another mask giveaway this Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon at Morrow Meadows Park. And we are going to be giving away these Hashtag We Are Kent Mass. So if you have time, please come by and say hello and get your mask. We will continue to distribute masks at different events throughout November and into December. So I know a lot of you are really excited about some of these fun masks that we have to share with everyone, and doing our part to keep everyone safe and make sure that you all have a great mask to wear. Then also a reminder, we do not have Committee of the Whole next Tuesday. I want to wish everyone happy Thanksgiving, and we will meet again the beginning of December. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Council President. Any other community events from Council? All right. I am not seeing any hands raised. With that, we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is our public safety report. And joining us is Chief Padilla.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. It's my pleasure to bring you the public safety report for November. This will be my last report of the year, barring any major incidents. So let's hope I don't have to come back up here. You understand what I mean? All right, first up, Movember. You may have noticed that I, along with many of our officers, are sporting more facial hair than we normally do. And that's because it's Movember. Movember started years ago as an effort to raise awareness for men's health issues and particularly for prostate cancer. So the fundraising began to develop research and hopefully a cure someday for those ailments. Well, that has grown. Kent PD, along with law enforcement agencies across the country, have gotten in on this great cause. And so every November, officers contribute money towards a cause and they get to wear facial hair. So for years, we've gone from mustaches to goatees to now beards. Beards are currently still against our grooming standards, so the officers take advantage of it for November. And if they pay an additional fee, they get to do it in December as well. So this year's cause is a great one. As you recall, Mayor, in your proclamation last month, the Pediatric Interim Care Center, PIC, located just blocks from City Hall, celebrated their 30th anniversary. And the officers have chosen to support them this year in fundraising efforts. So all the money is going towards them. Founded in 1990, PIC was the first of its kind in the nation to provide the important work of caring for drug-exposed and medically fragile newborns. Since that time, in the last 30 years, they've helped more than 3,100 infants get a safe and healthy start to life. As you can recall, Mayor Ralph did, like I said, the proclamation back in October. So great cause, great effort. You can see some of the pictures of the officers there at the center. Michael Riley in the middle there, I want to recognize him. He leads our Movember fundraising effort every year. So very proud of that. Next slide, please, Tim. I also want to take a moment to present a life-saving award for some of our corrections staff. What happened, here are the details. Back on September 7th, Corrections Officer John Morosco was alerted that an inmate was having medical issues. He responded to the top tier of the C unit in the jail, found the male inmate unresponsive with abnormal breathing and was unconscious. He contacted Nurse Karen Santiago. If you don't know, we do contract medical services at the jail for our inmate population. He got a hold of her. She began to administer aid, called for a medical code response, and Morosco called for firefighters and advanced life-saving through 911. Nurse Santiago administered CPR. They were joined by Officer Ryan Armstrong, who also came in with the AED, the automatic electronic defibrillator. He attempted a shock, but that wasn't advised by the machine. Not giving up, he went to Narcan, which is also, we keep on supply there, attempted to give 2 doses. That did not fix the issues, so they continued to do CPR. At one point, Officer Morosco took over. He conducted CPR for 6 straight minutes. And if you ever had to do the CPR certification or actually apply it, you know that's very exhaustive. He was relieved by Officer Armstrong, who also performed CPR for a while before they were able to get the male to regain his pulse and consciousness. Eventually, he was transported to the hospital for additional treatment, so they saved him. Corrections Officers Morosco and Armstrong and Nurse Santiago are being commended for their quick response in the successful life-saving efforts that resulted in the inmate surviving this life-threatening medical crisis. These actions and compassionate care exemplify the mission and the values of Kent Police Department. So earlier today, our command staff presented their awards in person at the jail, but we also wanted to take a moment to let our community know and congratulate them for a job well done. Next slide, please, Kim. Racer emphasis. So we continue to get several calls regarding illegal street racing, mainly complaints about the noise and the cars whipping by. And we continually get the question about what we're doing to fix the issue. And so I wanted to bring back some data. I discussed this a bit in a prior meeting, but go over some of what our results were for the last detail. So back on October 23rd, we ran an emphasis over the weekend. We had 5 agencies that we partnered with, including Washington State Patrol, Federal Way PD, and 2 of the military investigation units. And this was all led right here in Kent by our officers. In that weekend, we contacted 54 unlawful race attendees. 53 of them received criminal citations. So they committed criminal offenses and they'll be awaiting their day in court. One of the drivers was cited for reckless driving, and we impounded 27 vehicles, and that's a big deal. One of the biggest things that the illegal street racers value is their cars. So when those get impounded and they have to pay fees and whatnot, that has an impact. We seized 2 guns while making arrests that night, so there's pending prosecution for those cases as well. And we did arrest 1 DUI driver. He actually wasn't part of the racing, but he fell in the category of in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so our officers observed him and made the arrest as well. I want to take a moment to recognize Sergeant Josh Bava. He actually led the effort for our department and was a key part of organizing all the agencies that came together. And I want to thank the other departments as well. Without the mutual aid and cooperation from the other jurisdictions, we would not have seen the success. So, we put a dent in their efforts. We're in a part of the year now where racing will subside because of weather, but I am certain they'll be back next spring and we will be back at dealing with the issue to the best of our ability. Next slide, please. I wanted to provide the community with an update on the officer-involved shooting we had a couple weeks ago. So back on November 4th, just a little after 8 p.m., our officers were dispatched to a domestic violence call in the area of the 13000 block of Southeast 204th Place up on our East Hill. Upon arriving, officers learned that the male involved in the domestic was arming himself with a rifle inside the home. The officers got there, took positions on the outside, setting up containment, and were able to talk some of the family members out of the residence and kind of get the neighbors out of harm's way there to the best of their ability. They called for SWAT, realizing that he was armed with a rifle, and while that was going on, there was a short standoff. They attempted to negotiate him out of the house briefly, and at one point, unfortunately, he did come out of the house with the rifle, and he fired several rounds at the officers. They returned fire. 3 officers returned fire, and they killed him in response to him shooting. No other individuals were hurt, and no officers were injured as a result of the shooting. According to the press release put out by the Valley Independent Investigation Team, their initial investigation determined that the male fired 7 rounds from a rifle while standing outside the front of his home, and the 3 Kent police officers returned fire, firing a total of 22 rounds in response, and all of that occurred within 7 seconds, so it happened really quickly. I want to assure the community that we are adhering to every letter of the law regarding independent investigations, that our officers that we have called upon, the Valley Independent Investigation Team, and they have taken over the investigation. They have full control of it, and as of yet, I still haven't received a briefing that's been scheduled for next week. So truly independent, waiting to see what they determine, which will be referred to the prosecutor for review as well. So, and I also want to note that this is the first incident that our 2 non-law enforcement representatives have been called upon to to assist with the investigation. As of this evening, new update, we have released video to media that have requested it, news media, body-worn camera of the three officers involved, so footage from their cameras. Because this is an active investigation, we don't generally release a ton of information in an effort to preserve the integrity of the investigation and not to create complications with potential prosecution down the line. But in this case, I decided, and this will be a standard practice of mine, that when we have an officer involved shooting and there is video, we will release the video, and we've done that. And Mayor Ralph was strongly in favor of doing that as well. I also want to be upfront with the community in saying that the video release is redacted to some degree. There are laws that require us to redact certain pieces of information and images regarding domestic violence incidents, so that has occurred. And so the videos do capture what we have regarding the shooting incident, but there are faces blurred and some of it is redacted for legal reasons. So I want to be upfront about that as well. So whenever we have a loss of life, it is a tragedy, and regardless of how it happens, I want to recognize that. And what we do is we roll out support to everybody involved, and that includes the family members of the victims. So our police chaplain, Jason Forge, responded to the scene that night and went directly. His job was to provide support and assistance to the family. He did that. He has a relationship with them, and that support is ongoing. Additionally, the Valley Independent Investigation Team assigns a family liaison so that the family has information about the investigation, what is taking place, what information is being released, and answering any other questions they may have regarding what happened. So that is occurring and ongoing. At the same time, we have deployed our peer support team to support the officers. As you can imagine, being shot at is a pretty traumatic event. Having to take a life is always a very traumatic event. So we are supporting them and assisting them in every way possible as well. Something occurred as part of this unfortunate incident that I wanted to note, and that the daughter of the deceased took time to note or post a note on our Facebook site. And it just shows the tragedy that this was, but it also, I thought, was a beautiful statement on her behalf, recognizing who her father was, demonstrating her love for him and what an incredible person he was leading up to this and prior to the onset of some medical issues that she pointed to as part of the driving force behind what happened. She took a moment to recognize that she and her father both very much were strong supporters of the military and law enforcement, and she took time to note, and I'm grateful for this for my officers, that she didn't blame the officers for what happened. She understood that this was beyond their control. So again, very tragic situation. Our hearts and prayers go out to the family and our officers and their families. So that is the update. As this continues on, Valley Investigation Team will be providing press releases to come. So, next slide, please, Kim. I wanted to go over another update on our crime statistics, and unfortunately, it's not good news, and we've been talking about this now for a few months, but here are the latest numbers. This represents 11 months of this year. So on this first slide here, you can see our year-to-year comparison, 2019 to 2020. If you look towards the middle of that chart, you can see a lot of red there, and that represents that our crime is up in those categories by those percentages. Most alarming, if you look at the bottom, our shootings are up by 53% over last year. Our aggravated assaults, which are not domestic assaults, but these are assaults involving a weapon of some sort or increased injury, felony level, are up 28%, and our commercial burglaries are up 20%. I don't know the specific driving factors for the shootings and aggravated assaults. We have some ideas on that, but we think squarely the increase in commercial burglaries are a result of a lot of our businesses are vacant. They still have their equipment and their supplies stocked, warehouses, stores, what have you, but there aren't people in them. So it makes them prime targets of opportunity. And we think that's driving the commercial burglaries. On the other side of things, I'm grateful that we are significantly down in our robberies and our residential burglaries. We think that the robberies are down simply because of COVID. There are less people out and about to be victimized. And we think the residential burglaries are a result of people are spending more time at home. And so that it makes it a harder target for criminals to break into their homes. So there's that. Again, we think there are several contributing factors, but I believe the overall rise is primarily attributable to the COVID and the impacts that COVID is having on our criminal justice system. Right now, we have decreased incarceration abilities. We're doing only mandatory arrests, and there are significant delays in our courts for having the cases prosecuted. So all of that results in a pretty big mess with the increase of the crime stats. Next slide, please, Ken. This slide here is specifically regarding our shootings. We've had 95 as of this report back on 11/2. If you look at the numbers there, our homicides are not significantly high. I mean, one is too many, but our average over the last 4 years has been 4 a year. We have 2 so far in this year. But what's more notable is that we're up significantly with 27 people being struck by firearm, by being shot. And our average there is a little over 19 per year, so we're up there. I think part of the reason that we don't see more fatalities is that we have been really focusing over the last few years in providing our officers with what we call combat life-saving trauma skills. That's paid off. We've upgraded our equipment so that they're more capable to do those life-saving efforts right away. And we think that's paying off. When you add that to the incredible resources and advanced life-saving that our firefighters bring and our emergency medical personnel, and then the reality is we have great medical facilities and services here as well. All of that combines for more people surviving these. So while the numbers are up in terms of people being hit, we're saving more people as a result. So 95 incidents total. If you look at the other segments there, property damage means that there was a shooting but only buildings were hit. And where you see shots fired, that means we verified that there was some shooting of some sort, but it didn't hit anything or any building. I do want to note that the vast majority of our shootings are not random acts, that most of them are related to some kind of illegal transaction, usually involving drugs or property. And while we have our incidents where people simply shoot off guns in the air, like say at the end of a Seahawks game, for whatever reason, most of them are involve people that are known to each other, and there's a nexus there. And I also want to note, I already talked about that last part. So next slide, please. Yes.
One quick second. Councilmember Thomas, do you have a question on this slide or just in general for the chief? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Looking over the last 2 slides, it's just hard for me to imagine why there are communities around the United States that are talking about defunding police departments. I just find that unbelievable. That's my say.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. All right, go ahead, Chief.
All right, and the last slide on this topic is a pin map. It shows where we've had the different shootings. Red represents homicides, yellow is where people were hit, green is property damage, and the blue dots are just areas where we verified that someone was shooting a gun, generally in the air. So I put this up just to show that there are some small areas where there's concentrated incidents, but as you can see, it's spread out across the entire city. That brings me to another thing I want to note, that if you look at the shooting data for South King County and Seattle, you will see very similar numbers and in some cases the numbers are worse. So this is definitely a regional issue and a regional challenge for us. So next slide there. And now that completes my report for tonight. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief before we move on this evening? All right, I am not seeing any hands raised. Thank you very much for that information, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on in our agenda. Item number 5 is reports from council and staff. This is an opportunity for our community to hear about the work that's being done outside of the formal council meetings or committees of the whole. I will start with a report tonight. As you can imagine, with the new COVID restrictions that have been put in place, I have been participating on multiple calls with the governor's office, trying to find out the impacts to our community, what the new restrictions mean, and the data behind that. So we'll continue to be in conversation with the governor's office. We also began this week meeting with our legislators. We had our first meeting with Senator Kaiser and Representative Gregerson's office to discuss our legislative agenda that the council had passed at a previous meeting. So we will continue to have those meetings with our legislators as we head into what's going to be a very interesting and different legislative session. It's going to be virtual, and not exactly sure how that works as far as engagement, but we will definitely keep folks posted and are grateful for the support of our entire legislative delegation. As far as outside committee meetings, the Transportation Policy Board at Puget Sound Regional Council, I am the vice chair of that group. We met last week and had presentations on the regional equity strategy. So helping us to understand the process that PSRC is undertaking as they develop that strategy to make sure that we're taking all things into consideration as we're developing policy for the region. We also received a presentation on the regional transportation outreach plan, which in the times of COVID, as you can imagine, is also very, very different than what it has been. I am proud of the work that PSRC is doing in the outreach to make sure that the diverse communities of this region are being reached and that input is being taken seriously. We also received a report on the specialized transportation services outreach. So those are all of the different modes of transportation for our folks with mobility challenges, senior population, our disabled community, making sure that we're outreaching to those as we develop those communities as we develop the plan as well. Finally, was on the South County Area Transportation Board committee meeting today, and we were working to finalize that group's legislative agenda. And I am pleased to report that projects like 509, the completion of it, will remain a priority of South King County. And we're asking our legislature to make sure that projects that were funded previously remain funded and that work moves forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Derek Matheson for our Chief Administrative Officer's report.
I'm going to keep it short tonight. My written report is in the packet, and there is no executive session this evening.
All right. Thank you, Derek. Council President Troutner, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had 3 presentations at workshop this evening. The first one was on the Kent Design Construction Standards, and this is updated periodically, but it has not been done since 2009. So the goals of the standard is to set up parameters for implementing a comprehensive plan, basically how we want the city to look and function. So with new updates to the state laws, the comprehensive plan, permit requirements, city code changes, and industry changes, it is time to update that document. So we've got information on that. The second presentation was on the 2021 Asphalt overlay projects. There is a formula for looking at pavement conditions and the best way to use money for improvements. And also grant money is considered into that formula. So you will see a lot of work being done on 212th this year. Also, some neighborhoods on East and West Hill will get some asphalt overlays and improvements. The third presentation was on the Kent Housing Option Plan, which is better known as KHOP. That will set a plan for housing in Kent, which will include supplying affordability, zoning, and more. And we looked at some of the trends in the housing market, We are working on a draft policy framework, which will include preservation and displacement prevention, growing and diversifying our housing stock, proactively addressing unique needs of Kent, and also telling our stories. So we are currently looking for input on that plan from the community. And there is a survey online, which some of you may have seen. There are also opportunities to participate in Zoom feedback. And one of those opportunities is this Friday, November 20th at 2 p.m. So if you are interested in participating in that, be sure to visit the Kent City website and sign up so that you can get an invite and be able to give your feedback and input. And I also sit on the Regional Law, Safety, and Justice Committee. We will meet in December, and the Regional Transit Committee, we will have a special meeting on the 30th. And just a reminder, our workshops are televised. So if you want to learn more about any of the presentations that we saw this evening or at any of our workshops, I encourage you to go out there and watch them, because there's definitely more detail than I've given here tonight. And with that, I will turn to my colleagues and see what they have been up to. And let's start with Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. I serve on Kent's Human Services Commission and the Regional Water Quality Committee, and both of those have meetings that are upcoming, so I don't have anything to report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Core, do you have anything this evening?
Yes, thank you, Council President. I serve on a King County Domestic Violence Initiative Regional Task Force. We actually had our meeting on November 10th, and we had conversations about I guess, an increase in domestic violence calls and how shelters are at capacity. So they have been having conversations about using CARES funding for possibly hotel vouchers for families. Our annual domestic violence symposium also took place past month, and centering its main idea of the domestic violence and symposium centered around racial equity when responding to domestic violence cases. For 2021, the focus areas are language access, racial equity, and DV-related. We also talked about DV-related deaths are up in King County compared to 2019. And there's a dashboard actually available with all the crime stats by King County Public Health Family Violence Dashboard. That's what it's called. So you can look up at the data if you're interested. I also, as Peter King, AWC executive, mentioned, I also serve on AWC's equity work group, and we actually had our meeting also past week. We have been working on roadmap for Race, Equity, and Leadership Action Plan for AWC, which is Association of Washington Cities. And we worked and prioritized our recommendations for the board to approve at possibly in December meeting. And some of the recommendations are, for example, council members are, especially BIPOC council members who don't have the means to leave their work, they have jobs during the day and they need childcare. So trying to incorporate the conferences that take place annually, how to make sure that they have access to the training and conferences, keeping that in mind. So that's just one example of some of the feedback that we provided. So hopefully it'll get approved next month. I also serve as chair for Puget Sound Clean Air Agency Advisory Council, and we'll be meeting next week. So I'll have an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Core. Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. So I serve on the King County Affordable Housing Committee, and we met on Friday. We had a pretty lengthy and hefty agenda. So we started out, our first topic was we voted to approve the Affordable Housing Committee shared revenue principles. And this was a document that guides decision-making related to pursuing and implementing local, state, and federal revenue sources, and also addressing who is responsible for raising which sources and source prioritization. So we've been working on this document, going back and forth. SCA caucus has submitted several amendments language over the last month, and I was pleased to report that, the concerns of the Sound Cities were included in the document, and I was quite satisfied with what we finally approved. Following that, we had our first look at the housing chapter of the countywide planning policies, and these are the guidance that will eventually inform and guide both county level and city level comprehensive plans. So they will inform and guide, I believe, KHOP here in Kent. So had our first look at that document. We will be, Sound Cities will be reviewing that again, and with the Affordable Housing Committee, and over the next few months, we'll be having discussions and stuff. And I believe then we actually present our requested amendments in January. And then finally, we had a look at and discussion around the state and federal legislative agenda for affordable housing. And relevant to Kent especially, I did ask for specific language to be added around the preservation of the higher quality mobile home parks. There was language around increasing notice of the park sales, and so increasing notice period for tenants, and then also relocation assistance for tenants, which was great. But as we know, there's an issue. There's an issue with where else are you going to find that comparable housing affordability in all of King County. So I did ask, and we'll see if that can be added, that there actually be preservation of parks, and along the lines of what Haley was speaking about earlier in workshop. So more on that. And then I also serve on the Aging and Disabilities Advisory Council for King County. And we are also having a meeting on topics of senior housing, and that'll be in December. So I'll report on that as well. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Councilmember Larmer. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I sit on the SCA PIC committee. We had a meeting last Wednesday. There was an election for the PIC chair and the vice chair. So Christina Brennan, who is the Sammamish council member, was re-selected as the PIC chair, and I was re-selected as the PIC vice chair. We also did our regional board and committee appointment approval. So those of you who are on the regional board and committee, you have heard word on your reappointment. I just want to point out a couple of things, a couple of meetings coming up. One is coming up on Friday, November 13th from 2:30 to 4. It's a series, Racial Equity and Justice series. This one here is really on the elected members of BIPOC. So I think Councilmember Fincher played a major role in that. I was earlier until my work kind of got in the way, so I haven't been involved as much as I was before in the past. I think Councilmember Fincher is still involved in that. Also, we were having a network meeting coming up for the legislative preview. That's on Friday, November 20th. And then we have an SCA annual meeting coming up on Wednesday, and that's on December 2nd from 5:30 to 7:30. And that's all I have to share, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce. Councilmember Thomas.
I serve on the Puget Sound Regional Fire Authority, along with our council president, Troutner, and our council member, Mr. Boyce. We had a kind of an emergency meeting November 4th to take care of some housekeeping type of things that had to be done to get the ordinances in on particular time. We also have a meeting tomorrow night at 5:30, Station 78, and that's going to be out of Covington, of course, 5:30. That's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. And Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to start with the Arts Commission. 2020 Silver Linings. That's the theme for the Kent Creates art contest that is going right now. That runs to the end of the year. So you have a good amount of time to get your entries in. Again, that's 2020 Silver Linings, looking for the good that happened this year. Taj Mahal is playing as we speak. So many of the people who are jazz lovers, blues lovers, would recognize that name. He's a very accomplished musician. Surprisingly, he is 78 years old. You would not guess that. But he is playing right now as part of the Spotlight series. And to come, we have the Magical Strings Celtic Yuletide Concert. That is an annual treat that comes to Kent. It has been coming for years. We have families who have been attending for years. That concert is going to be streamed December 6th. So tickets are available. You can get your tickets now before those sell out. The KCD and King Conservation District and the Mental Illness and Drug Dependency Advisory Council, no report for that since my last report earlier this month. And then, as Councilmember Boyce mentioned, we both serve on the SCA Racial Equity and Justice Committee. We had our last workshop last Friday, the last workshop for this year. There will be no workshop in December. We will pick up those monthly workshops again starting in January, so I hope you guys tune in. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fincher. Madam Mayor, that ends our reports.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Councilmember Fincher, I will tell you, I was very happy to learn that we are going to, even in COVID, be able to bring our Celtic Christmas program there. That is a multi-generational family that performs, and multiple generations of Kent residents have been enjoying it. So at least one thing stays the same. Even if the venue is different, at least we're able to bring it to our residents. So very, very happy about that.
Yes.
All right.
There's a portion of that concert where they get up and dance. So hopefully people will be dancing in their homes.
I would love to see that, right? We can maybe have people, maybe we should have them send in some little selfies or something of how they're celebrating at the concert. All right, we are going to move on in the agenda. Item number 6 is public hearing, and we do not have any this evening. Item number 7 is public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to provide comment to the council on issues related to business of the city of Kent. I would ask that when you are called upon that you state your name and city of residence for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our city clerk, Kim, to go ahead and manage this portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have 11 people signed up to speak, and then I have multiple comments to read into the record. The first speaker is Brittany Schneider.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Schneider, and I am a resident of Kent. I am also an elementary educator, and I currently serve an amazing classroom of second graders. I'm reaching out to you to stand in solidarity with 442 and King County Equity Now to prioritize the health, the safety, and the wellness of Black and Indigenous people in our community. We know that when we do that, the health and well-being of our entire community is stronger. Institutional and systemic racism are currently upheld in this country and in our community. And I'm here to demand you, as my and our city council, to do something about it. So equity is impossible to approach without the inclusion of race. Race must be understood as what it is, a structure of inequity that our country was founded on. True equity cannot be achieved without combating racism and white supremacy, and true equity cannot be achieved without the leadership and guidance of those most impacted by inequity: Black, Indigenous people of color, youth, and otherwise marginalized communities. I hear all of you speak of supporting equity in the city of Kent. I've marched this summer. I've heard people speak and say, yes, we stand in solidarity, but I have yet to see actual concrete actions taken to really support our communities. The truth is that so far our leaders say that they're for equity, but I don't see the actions behind it. The current budget proposal fails to support true racial equity and lacks tangible community-based solutions to combat issues of systemic racism and white supremacy. And please, as you make final decisions on how our money will be spent in the upcoming year, I demand that your actions toward racial equity answer the calls to invest in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Thus, I'm demanding that you do not invest another $864,000 into new police vehicles, that you developed a fair, public, and independent review process of police killings and police brutality, especially after the information that we learned today. Defund the Kent Police Department by $22.7 million, at least 50%. Demilitarize Kent PD and cut ties between KPD and our school districts and keep our kids safe. Reallocate the funding proposed for an equity manager toward the development of a fully independent and fully funded participatory budgeting process so that we, the people, have control of how our money is spent. And invest in Black-led spaces and solutions in accordance with King County Equity Now's recommendations. You've already received an email from 442 with detailed budget breakdown. This breakdown includes well thought out initiatives that will allow you to easily review the budget and to reflect the demands listed above. I demand you please take care of our community members. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jamal M.
Hello, my name is Jamal Marshall. I'm here to speak to you all, Mayor, City Council members, and the community listening in about what concerns me with this city budget proposal. This is not my first time speaking, but I hope it's the first time I am heard. I am a resident of Kent, a young adult, a Black male, a worker, a taxpayer, a community member, and a member of 442. Like you all, I am a human that loves to love, because if we prioritized hate, we wouldn't be mingling together in a society if we couldn't relate. Collaboration is at our forefront as the human race. Our collective ability is what allowed us to win the race against other species. We dominate together, we, the collective of all humans. We work best together, always have and always will. Now, regarding city budget uses, there are events that I and other critics appreciate. Events like food and supply giveaways are fantastic. This is a starter sample of community-focused uses of the city budget. There is more to appreciate, but let's focus on what would make our lovely city even better. I demand that the city integrates 442's demands and uses this critical literature as a catalyst for transforming our city's budget. When assessing the budget, some things that should be asked are, how can we fund more things to support each other? How can we ensure that we are all safe, especially during a pandemic? Public safety is not a low priority for me, and I can prove it because I do not want to be robbed or at gunpoint because a fellow human, a community member, does not have the means to provide themselves or their family with basic needs. We need to drastically revise the budget so our community is funded and nobody lacks basic needs. Crime rates will plummet if everyone can eat. It's just hard for me to imagine why there are elected officials around the United States not talking about funding communities. Anyway, the budget proposal is heavily criticized in these time slots because if we are trying to move forward and make more good happen, then this time is best served highlighting demands that should be implemented in the spirit of community first, unity, and racial equity. We, the critics, care enough to be engaged here and elsewhere consistently, but most of y'all don't care enough to spend time talking to us. So when we're relegated to the confines of 3 minutes of talking at you, that means we're not talking with you. And if we're not talking with you, then I do not believe that we are united, like all those brainwashing advertisements feign. Please shed your egos and prepare to hear more critiques from community members that have transformed hopes of improvement into feasible demands that could be implemented if enough people in power had a real concern for improving our city budget. I leave you with this quote: "True words are often unpleasant. Pleasant words are often untrue." I yield my time.
The next speaker is Heaven Hamilton.
Hello, my name is Heaven, and I'm a resident of Kent for over 16 years, and I'm also a member of 442. I am reaching out to you because I care about the city of Kent, and above all else, I will fight and demand that action is taken towards racial equity in the city. Over the past few months, we have seen you speak on supporting racial equity in the city of Kent. And as you make final decisions on how our money will be spent in the upcoming year, we demand that you take action towards racial equity by supporting the demands of BIPOC youth in the city. One of the demands that many Kent residents are asking for is to invest in community research towards developing a non-police response and investing in Black-led spaces. This means allocating money towards BIPOC-led, independent from the KPD and the city of Kent, research and development of non-police emergency responses. A co-respondent solution to the violence of the police is not a solution because it fails to address the reality of how police officers by design are violent, induce stress and fear when they respond to BIPOC communities, poor communities, queer and trans communities, and situations of mental distress and interpersonal violence. This also means investing in Black-led spaces and solutions in accordance with King County Equity Now's recommendation. The funding that is needed to invest in a non-police response in Black-led spaces will come from defunding police. The origins of police can be dated back to slavery and slave catchers. Councilmember Thomas, you said earlier that you can see why we're calling to defund the police. Well, listen to this. Crime rates are based on what is defined as crime and how people are arrested, charged, and convicted. If you make someone's existence a crime, then they will be considered criminal. The point is, crime rates are not going to magically go down when you start funding the police more. Now, let's be clear. The police have been around, they have been funded, they have tried to be part of the solution. They have still not solved the problems that you think they would have solved after how many years of existing, after how many years of increased funding. Today is your chance. Do not increase the Kent Police Department's budget in 2021 and see to it that the KPD is defunded by $22.7 million. Use portions of that money to develop a non-police response and invest in Black-led spaces. While we appreciate that the council members who have reached out to us, we also want to call out that most of the city officials have not engaged with 442 or a significant slice of our larger Kent community to work through racial equity issues. We are stalled here in the public comment section, shouting at what is obvious to us, but skated around by those in power. Standing up for racial justice means listening to your Black residents, honoring Black lives, standing behind Black Lives Matter, supporting Black civic leadership, participation, and finally, grappling with the impacts of systemic anti-Black racism in the U.S. Take the necessary steps towards honoring Black lives and building a new normal that is rooted in equity. I yield my time.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jenny, and I have been a resident of Kent for my entire life, and I'm a member of 442. Over the past month, we have seen you speak of supporting equity in the city of Kent. As you make final decisions on how your money will be spent in the upcoming year, we demand that you take action towards racial equity by supporting the demands of BIPOC youth in this city. One of the demands that many Kent residents are asking for is to defund the police. Specifically, you should defund the police by $22.7 million or 50% to be equitably reallocated to primarily Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. While this may seem drastic, at a closer look, the police are actually funded at a way higher rate than any other city department. We live in a city where the police make up 42% of general fund expenditures, while economic and community development only gets 8%. We are getting labeled as radicals who don't know what we're talking about, or even people who want violence, when in reality, we are residents and youth who want to live in a safer community where our tax dollars are being properly used. Research shows that there is no consistent correlation between larger police forces and lower crime rates. However, larger police forces do target and criminalize Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, enforce the school-to-prison pipeline, and exacerbate the existence of poverty in communities. According to a March 2019 study by the George Mason University, body cameras do not have a significant effect on police officers' behavior and use of force. Yet the city of Kent continues to spend additional money on these reforms when the best way to reduce violence is actually to reduce policing. In 2016, A study by the American Journal of Preventative Medicine found that 20 to 50% of fatal encounters with law enforcement involved an individual with a mental illness. Some people try to argue that the police are here to protect us, but who exactly are they protecting us from? The system of policing is not designed to de-escalate situations or to provide aid to folks who need it. There's a reason that we're not here asking you to defund the fire departments or defund social workers. What these statistics show and what the movement for Black Lives that has continued for months has brought to light is that public safety does not equal policing. Our money would be better used if reallocated to invest in the community. Council members, I urge you to reconsider and listen to our budget demands before you adopt the 2021-2022 Biennial Budget. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Noah Collier.
Hello, my name is Noah Collier, and I have been a resident of Kent for 19 years. I've attended Daniel Elementary, Mill Creek Middle School, and Kent Meridian High School, all schools predominantly students of color. I've been a part of this community my entire life. I'm speaking out because over the past month, we have seen you speak of supporting equity in the city of Kent. As you make final decisions on how our money will be spent in the upcoming year, we ask that you take action towards racial equity by supporting the demands of BIPOC youth in this city. We demand you defund the police by 50%, specifically $22.7 million, to be equitably distributed to primarily Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. No new police vehicles, demilitarize the police, and KSD must cut ties with KPD. And you must develop a fair and public review process of police killings and police brutality. Police cannot solve the problems that poverty creates. Police officers arrive at the scenes after the fact, and policing does not address the root of the problem. Only equitable municipal budgeting can. Our current system needs to be reduced in power, scope, and budget to make way for this. Militarizing the police only adds more unnecessary funds to the police that could be going into the community. And over the militarization of police creates more room for violence and takes focus away from safety or de-escalation. The handling of issues regarding police brutality being completely disconnected from the community leave all the room in the world for police to avoid accountability for their actions. Our current systems need to be reduced in power, scope, and budget. After slavery was abolished in 1865, those same slave catchers continued to harass, torture, and police Black Americans. That eventually turned into the police enforcing Black codes and Jim Crow laws. The American police system is inherently racist based on its origins and the bias that has been built into the justice system. We see reallocating police funds as a very tangible solution to a web of very real problems. Community members who are in unquestioning support of police share our concern of public safety, but offer nothing new when the conversation is about tangible solutions to a problem that has held steady as the police budget has grown million after million, year after year. We all want the same thing. We all want an inclusive community that we feel safe in, where the community feels heard. It's time you make your actions a reflection of that. Stop criminalizing poverty. I yield my time.
Is Deonica Sai.
Good evening. My name is Nika Sai. I'm a lifelong resident of Kent and a member of 442. I'm speaking today because for months we've seen you speak of supporting equity in the city of Kent, but have found a disconnect between your words and your actions. As you make final decisions on how our money will be spent in the upcoming year, we demand that you take action towards racial equity by supporting the demands of BIPOC youth in this city. One of the demands that many Kent residents are calling for is funding for Black-led and youth-led organizations. We demand that you fund these Black-led and youth-led organizations with $4 million in 2021 through the reallocation of police funds. There are organizations in Kent that provide mentoring and social and emotional support to BIPOC youth. These organizations are in place to support youth through completing their education and protect them from being pushed through the school-to-prison pipeline. Local organizations should receive funds from Kent for youth investment as it matches initiatives tied to economic development. As the elected officials of Kent, it is your job to continuously improve our city. Improvements do not happen when necessary change is neglected or when community demands are ignored. According to a 2020 study by Bridgespan Group and Echoing Green, funding for Black-led organizations nationwide is significantly and disproportionately lower than funding for white-led organizations. Today, you have an opportunity to meet the demands of your BIPOC residents. You have already received an email from 442 with a detailed budget breakdown, including well-thought-out initiatives that will allow you to easily revise the budget to reflect these demands. Again, defund the police by 50%. Invest in Black-led and youth-led organizations. Honor Black lives. Work towards building a new normal that is rooted in equity. The days of maintaining the status quo rooted in systemic racism are over. I yield my time.
The next speaker is Komalpreet Kaur.
My name is Komalpreet. I am from Kent, or more accurately, I am on the stolen lands of the Coast Salish and the Duwamish peoples, and am in solidarity with their fight for liberation, as is 442. I am speaking today because over the past few months, we have seen you speak of supporting equity in the city of Kent, and have found a disconnection between your words and your actions. You release proclamations and mayoral directives in the name of equity, of supporting Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities in this city, yet you do not act on these words. Today, you are making final decisions on a budget that will not benefit our communities. You have chosen not to listen to BIPOC youth in this city, and the majority of us, and the majority of you, have continued to chastise and ignore us. This is why we are demanding that the decision-making power in this city be returned to the Black, Indigenous, people of color in Kent. We demand a participatory budget process in the city as opposed to the equity manager position being proposed. Participatory budgeting is a transparent, people-powered process that centers around the need to ensure that communities who are impacted by systemic oppression have a voice. It is a better way to manage public money. We as communities in this city know where our money can be best used and can formulate the best solutions for our communities. Our solutions will be better, more equitable, and innovative than any single individual, city council, or government body alone. In the participatory budget process, historically disenfranchised groups are able to participate, and historically marginalized ones tend to participate more in this process, leading to the government hearing new voices. The city of Kent does not need an equity manager. Let's be clear here. Prior to the Black Lives Matter movement reigniting in the spring of this year, where was the city of Kent when it came to racial equity? As someone who grew up in Kent, I have seen the colonized school curriculum, the enforced school-to-prison pipeline due to the SROs being in schools, the overfunding of police, and the defunding of BIPOC communities in the city. There was racial injustice, economic injustice, systematic racism, police murders, police brutality, discrimination in 2009, 2018, 2017, and since this city has been formed. Again, the city does not need an equity manager. We need to return the decision-making power back to the people of this city. The city council themselves do not know what the equity manager would do, yet they are fully prepared to allocate money to this position. We as BIPOC communities have been working to keep our communities safe and healthy for years. You should be centering our solutions. I yield my time.
The next speaker is Christina Brennan.
Hi, my name is Christina Brennan, and I'm a resident of Kent on occupied Duwamish land, and I'm also a member of the Washington Poor People's Campaign. I decided to call in live tonight because last time I submitted comment, it was actually cut short because I had similar demands to other people, but that was not my full statement, and I actually had different things in there as well. And I noticed this happened to other people who were supporting 442's budget demands. So I think that we deserve an apology. I also wanted to address maybe some ways that you could fix that. So the person reading the comments can maybe share their screen so that we can see what they're reading. And then maybe we could also have the opportunity to submit video for these types of meetings for those of us who can't make it live on a Tuesday evening. I'm also asking anybody listening to take leadership from the young Black, Indigenous, and other organizers of color who are telling us exactly what they need for a thriving future, what King County Equity now calls a new normal rooted in equity. And guess what? That means we all thrive. So I've said this before, we're the most diverse city and the only county named after Martin Luther King Jr. And so we have a really unique opportunity to implement the policies that he called for. Our quote, diversity is merely a representation of surrounding gentrification if we're not rooting in equity. Dr. King would be in favor of defunding the militarized police in order to invest in community wellness. We have to rethink what public safety means. Safety and policing are not synonymous. Which goes to your comment, Councilmember Thomas, about why would people call to defund the police? Because not everybody feels safe with the police. And if you do, you should really interrogate, who are you afraid of and why? And are you not safe or are you just a little uncomfortable? And people have already addressed the statistics. We saw that when you actually looked over at the column per capita, it wasn't that much of an increase. And so why would we not try some other things, like with the gentleman that was just killed? Maybe if we had robust mental health services, family counseling, maybe it wouldn't have gotten to that point. Maybe we could have prevented that from happening. I fully support the demands for the participatory budgeting. It's wild that we have to come together and come to these calls instead of just being part of the process from the beginning. It kind of feels like it's too late at this point, you know? So don't invest in an equity manager like we've heard from the people who need the equity. Let's do what they asked and do participatory budgeting. Let's not waste $864,000 on new police vehicles. Let's develop a fair, public, and independent review process of police killings and police brutality. That means Des Moines PD cannot be the one investigating it, like in Giovanni Joseph McDade's case. Got to demilitarize the police, and that means removing them from Kent School District. Defund by that $22.7 million. And they've been told where the money should go. So just listen to what these folks are telling you to do. Invest in the Black-led spaces and solutions presented by King County Equity Now and 442. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sandy Mclaughlin.
Hi, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you. First, I wanted to start off by saying I care very much about Kent. I live in downtown, and I do a lot of walking around here. I go to all the stores down here, spend all of my time here. I urge you to keep the budget for the Kent PD. Based on the numbers shown by the Kent PD, we need our police force. I disagree with the other participants. I believe that the police force needs to be there. I cannot imagine what would happen if they were not there. If you've ever been robbed or had your car broken into, you would probably feel the same way. And we have a really high rate of both of those things happening. Who's going to help you when the man comes up to you with a gun? I'm not going to talk him out of it. That's not going to happen. We need help. I disagree strongly with the defunding of the Kent PD. We need our officers. Please, I'm asking that we either sustain or increase the Kent PD funding. Thank you.
The next speaker is Cheryl Nowoski. And I'm not sure that she's still on the call here. There she is. I'm just trying to unmute Cheryl here, and there we go.
Kim?
Yep,
Are we? Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl. I am a 35-year resident of Kent, Washington. Madam Mayor and City Council, why am I against defunding our police department? Common sense tells you why. Our police force is so many things. First responders to many kinds of 911 calls, domestic violence, homicides, accidents, people in crisis, abuse, missing individuals, old and young, and the list keeps growing. Did you know that for certain medical crises, police are dispatched to aid, becoming social workers and supporting all aged family members and friends during the worst times of their lives? There are many kinds of outreach programs provided by our department. By defunding, we as human beings totally ignore the victims. How? By allowing slow response and lawlessness, rendering victims helpless, a remembrance for the rest of their lives. Just look at our neighboring cities to see that it is destroying victims, commerce, and poses significant threats to public safety. Minority neighborhoods oppose defunding, knowing there will be less help for them. Constant training is needed, as in any job, to continue to learn what works and what doesn't in our ever-changing communities. Police take on the job to serve and protect. Do you know that 0.5% misfit their uniform? A better average than clergy. Obviously, those who want to defend have never needed the police or been so filled with gratitude that help was there. It certainly would change perspective. Do I want my grandchildren or any family member out in a situation where it takes an officer to respond an extended period of time because there are fewer officers? A driver driving erratically on any street on any day, and no one can come to help. I have asked myself, are we dealing with officials that are not representing us and acting on their own personal vendettas? Is tunnel vision an issue? How can our officers be so disrespected when they put their lives on the line for all every day? What do these officers have to take home with them after a shift? Maybe you should look into it. Defunding is the wrong direction. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bill Cogswell.
Yes, good evening. I'm a 25-year Kent resident, and during that time, I've seen local reports of steadily rising crime, and I disagree with defunding the Kent Police. Just look at the results in our communities where defunding is happening. Seattle's being destroyed. It's a dirty, violent, dangerous place. During a visit there, 2 members of my family were attacked in broad daylight. It took police 15 minutes to arrive, and by the time they got there, the attacker vanished. The police were delayed because they were stretched too thin. Just this week, the police chief said that the Seattle Police Department's understaffed and can't protect the city. Seattle residents are fleeing, businesses are leaving, the tax base is evaporating, and on and on. And I'm sure you've seen reports of how Minneapolis, the birthplace of all this defund lunacy, is now desperately trying to hire more police amid rising violent crime. I'm guessing no council members live in Seattle. And I'm guessing many might have reservations about even visiting the city. Then why consider replicating in Kent actions and policies like defunding that have failed so spectacularly in Seattle and elsewhere? To those council members who are actively advocating for defunding, as a Kent resident, I ask, what really are your motivations? This issue is not something that has widespread local public support. It will not improve our city. If this is part of a personal agenda or crusade on the part of a few, I really seriously question that rationale. One other point. This summer, I stopped by a local Kent gun store out of curiosity. I was stunned to learn that over a 3-day period, that one little store sold over 8,500 guns to people in our community. Clearly, if law enforcement is further hamstrung, defunded, or understaffed, the tax-paying people of Kent are going to take matters into their own hands, and who could blame them? I would suggest that helping protect the lives and property of law-abiding citizens in this community is one of the council's key responsibilities. It is not responsible to defund the police department that does exactly that. The Kent police are vital to our city. There's no reason to defund them. If we need training or other services, we can talk about that. Therefore, I respectfully urge the council to resist the politically correct passions of the moment and call to defund the police silly, misguided, and dangerous as an idea. Moreover, I would say that our police actually need more funding and their numbers need to be increased. Thank you.
That is the end of the people signed up to speak. I have additional public comments to read that were submitted. The following individuals submitted statements: Michael Nguyen, Jessica Liu, Zach Leclerc, and Monica Mendoza Castrojean, all of whom are Kent residents. Each of these individuals included in their statements the following list of demands of the group 442. I hear you all speak of supporting equity in the city of Kent, but have not seen enthusiastic commitment to the practice of equity. The current budget proposal fails to support true racial equity and lacks tangible community-based solutions to combat issues of systematic racism and white supremacy. As you make final decisions on how our money will be spent in the upcoming year, I demand that your actions towards racial equity answer the calls to invest in Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Thus, I am demanding that you do not invest another $864,000 into new police vehicles. Develop a fair, public, and independent review process of police killings and police brutality. Defund the Kent Police Department by $22.7 million, 50%. Demilitarize Kent PD and cut ties between KPD and the Kent School District. Reallocate the funding proposed for an equity manager toward the development of a fully independent and fully funded participatory budgeting process so that we, the people, have control over how our money is spent. Invest in Black-led spaces and solutions in accordance with King County Equity Now's recommendations. I know that public safety is a concern of every member in this community. As our elected public officials in Kent, you should enact measures that support public safety for all members of our community. When BIPOC communities say they do not feel safe around police or supported by the city, it reveals areas of governing that require revision. The City of Kent does not need more police officers. As stated in the following letter to the Kent City Council that labor groups signed on to, and this is in quotes, the City of Kent budget is a moral document and therefore must reflect the values of who it should serve, the people, families, workers, and community, end quotes. The time for justice is now. Michael Nguyen submitted additional comments as follows. I have been a resident of Kent for 20 years. I am a high school graduate of Kent Ridge High School, a former Kent School District student, and a current college student of Highline College. I am reaching out to you because the current system put in place is full of systematic racism and white supremacy with structural, institutional, and systematic barriers discriminating, oppressing, and continuing to affect Black, Indigenous, people of color, youth, and other marginalized communities. A corrupt system with structural and institutional corruption that has been so successful in binding people to the real truth behind America's history, full of lies taught and written by colonizers and oppressors, needs to be abolished completely and immediately. The horrific instances, memories, and strategies of racial injustice and police brutality needs to end now. For too long, BIPOC communities have been traumatized by the creation of an oppressive and corrupt system full of systematic racism for centuries that has been labeling Black and Indigenous people as a threat for their skin color and nationality. Without true equality being achieved in the highest form, equity would be almost impossible to reach if the structural barriers of corruption isn't completely abolished, since it was built on racism and inequality. Race within this country was built by a structure of inequality, and true equity can't be achieved without leadership and guidance by those who have been mostly impacted by inequity. Black, brown, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC, the youth, and otherwise marginalized communities. Jessica Liu submitted these additional comments. I have been a resident of Kent for 23 years. I was born and raised in Kent, spending the majority of my life in Kent Public Schools. I'm reaching out to you because I am a person of color who has seen the effects that racial inequity plays out in our schools and community. I believe that the city has not been prioritizing the well-being of all its citizens despite toting around pride for being so diverse. I was a student when the schools couldn't even afford toilet paper. I've come to wonder, why is it so difficult to propose defunding the police when it has been normal to underfund other extremely important facets of the city? The movement to defund the police is not a matter of reactive vengeance. It is a thoughtful movement that questions where our priorities are. Wouldn't it be better to prevent crime before it even happens? In the last City Council meeting that I watched, Chief Padilla used his own data to show the correlation between lacking a high school diploma and crime. In this situation, wouldn't it be better to provide students with the resources they need to succeed in school, thus decreasing their chance of committing crime? It would be wonderful if the mayor, council members, and the community at large took this moment to consider equity. Equity is impossible to approach without the inclusion of race. Race must be understood to be what it is, a structure of inequity. True equity cannot be achieved without combating racism and white supremacy. Furthermore, true equity cannot be achieved without the leadership and guidance of those most impacted by inequity: Black, Indigenous, people of color, youth, and otherwise marginalized communities. Zach Leclerc submitted these additional comments. I am a Kent resident living in East Hill near Clark Lake Park. I'm only recently moved to Kent since April of this year, but I grew up in Shoreline, Washington, and look forward to calling Kent home for a while. I'm reaching out to you because as a white male educator, I believe it is my responsibility to respond to the voices, those who our society has too often marginalized when it comes to issues of racial inequity and social justice. I'm writing to express my support of the demands of the organizers at 442, who are local community members of color who know too well the harms that policing in our schools and neighborhoods have on those most vulnerable in our society: immigrants, youth, poor and working class folks, unhoused folks, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I agree with 442's assessment that the current budget could go much further to actively shift resources, power, and money towards investing in Kent's communities of color rather than investing in systems that are meant to control them. I stand with their demands. Please take the time to listen to the communities of color who are speaking up in this time of mass unrest around racial inequities in our society. If you take the present budgetary stance that reaffirms a pre-2020 status quo, you run the risk of falling behind in the inevitable shifts towards social and racial equity that you must see coming. I believe that Kent can be a leader in this movement in its willingness to listen to and partner with its community members who have been most impacted by systems that harm. Please consider what leadership role you can play in making real resource and cultural change for racial equity in Kent. Monica Mendoza Casterjon provided these additional comments. I, Monica Mendoza Casterjon, a City of Kent resident, member of the 47th Legislative District Democrats and board member of the Working Families Party here in Washington, urge the City of Kent, council members, and Mayor Ralph to please heed the call of your community members, especially youth communities of color, immigrants, and refugees, before fully bringing forth the budget that is being presented as it is right now. The Working Families Party, a group founded by labor groups, activists, and working people, is alive and present here in the City of Kent and in Washington State. We are a multiracial party that wants our country and communities to be about the many, not the few. We want our America that realizes the promise We want an America that realizes the promise, unrealized in our history, of freedom and equality for all. This comment was received by Rob Mueller, a resident of Kent. I'm honored to be living in this beautiful community. I'm reaching out to you because it is pertinent to focus on racial equity so our community members here who have been historically marginalized the most can fully live and thrive here in Kent. I ask of you to please revise your budget to match the demands and proposed budget from 442, our young leaders here engaging in and caring for our community and for our future. This comment was received by Sukhman Dillon, a resident of Kent. I was a Kent Parks youth soccer official last year, and although it couldn't happen this year because of the pandemic, I just want to say I had a lot of fun and the environment was so welcoming. I want to thank the City of Kent for providing opportunities like that to take part in the community and to be able to take part in a sport I love. I also want to say that the free pop-up mask events are a great idea and an important thing for the city because of the times we are in right now. This last comment was submitted as a public comment. It is more of a question that staff will follow up with tomorrow. It is from Kevin Pham, and he submitted, how will the outgoing Trump administration / incoming Biden administration affect life in Kent? Mayor, that is the end of the public comments.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to everyone that took the time to participate in public comment this evening. Councilmember Thomas, I see you have your hand raised. You are on mute, sir.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit. Since my name was mentioned several times, first of all, I really thought the letters that were read on both sides of the issue were well written, extremely well written, in fact, and I enjoyed hearing from both, which is kind of our job, is to listen to both sides and make a decision. For those who don't know me, I am a product of Kent, from elementary all the way to Kent Meridian and Highline College and the University of Washington. I mean, I grew up in Kent, and it was a lot different then. I will give you that. And but there's a couple of things I wanted to share just real briefly. Number one, some of the history that was given was not accurate. For example, Martin Luther King was not even born when King County was named. In fact, he was named after William King, the 13th vice president under Franklin Pierce way back in the 1800s. So that was one little thing that got my attention, because I also served on King County Council before coming to Kent Council. There were so many things that were really, really good, but I just wanted to share a few things that I let my 4 kids grew up in Kent Meridian as well, as did my granddaughter who lives with us. And we've seen the changes. We've seen the Kent where there was very few minority to the point where Kent Meridian is, of course, a minority majority. So that's a very significant difference. Not wrong or right, it's just the way it is. And my kids all enjoyed the diversity, and they've all commented on it. They love the diversity of Kent Meridian. There were so many new and exciting ideas that were shared, many from the backgrounds of their culture or where the countries that they came from.
Councilmember Thomas, can I interrupt you and
yes.
say that we'll call for a discussion on budget-related issues once we get the budget presentation?
Okay. Then I'll wind up with just this. I just wanted to repeat the fact that these letters were so well written. I enjoyed it very much. And I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right, we are going to move on now to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the consent calendar. This is a compilation of work that the council has done over the last several weeks at the Committee of the Whole. They've received presentations on, had an opportunity for discussion, and these items have been moved forward without controversy. With that, Council President, do you have a motion for the consent calendar?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to accept consent calendar items A through S.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, Council. Item number 9 is other business. We have 2 items this evening. The first one is the ordinance adopting the 2021-2022 biennial budget. Joining us for the presentation this evening is our Finance Director, Paula Painter.
Good evening, Mayor Ralph, Council President Troutner, and members of City Council. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. In front of you is an ordinance to adopt the 2021-2022 biennial budget. This budget process seems like it started quite some time ago through discussions early with the City Council members. It was really an engaging, collaborative process that we went through, as well as working really closely with department directors as well. Overall, the total budget for the biennium would be $688 million. That's comprised of $339.9 million of expenditures in 2021 and $348.5 million in expenditures for 2022 citywide. Next slide, please. Some of the budget highlights that I'm going to share with you today include the equity manager position that would be funded beginning in 2021, and the Economic and Community Development Opportunity Fund for $300,000, as well as a police data consultant for $50,000, the co-responder program for $100,000, youth behavioral health at $200,000, human services opportunity fund at $100,000, as well as some museum funding. In addition, we did have a new revenue that had been approved by council earlier this summer, and this was the outdoor square footage tax, which would generate money to be able to fund some of the items that you see there on the screen today. And in addition to that, we do have some capital items that are of note, one of which we've included in the budget is continued investment in the Mill Creek Canyon with the revitalization and cleanup of that, as well as the Kent Memorial Park renovation and street overlays. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them.
All right, council members, any questions for Paula? All right, I am not seeing any hands raised. With that, a motion would be in order.
Madam Mayor, I move to adopt ordinance number 4381, adopting the 2021-2022 biennial budget.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Councilmember or Council President Troutner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know I gave some comments last week at the end of our committee meeting, but I just want to thank my colleagues again for all of your questions, for doing your homework, and for the conversations that we had the past month and a half. It got us to where we are today, and I am very proud of where we ended up, and I am happy to support this budget this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Core.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank all the community members for providing your feedback. Even if it might seem like we are not listening to you, I have listened to every word you said and taken into consideration when working through this budget. I want to make sure, I'm sure that's the case with my colleagues as well. And I'm open to continue having those conversations with you so we can have the dialogue going in the future. So please feel free to contact me, send me an email. I want to thank the staff for doing their hard work and answering our questions during the several months and responding to any crazy ideas that we might have and working with us on that. This is not what all of us want 100%, but it's a compromise. It's where we got. So I want to appreciate and thank all my colleagues for their dialogue, their conversations, and all the comments we had. And we'll continue having the conversation on equity. This is not done. Just because this budget is done, we will make sure, I'll personally make sure that I will continue asking the questions that I continue asking, and I will continue to be in the conversations about equity, manager conversations, and I hope Mayor and a CAO will consider Culture Communities Board to be part of this conversation when you're creating the job description and when you're working on hiring this person and including community on what their job description is going to be, so we can make sure we're actually being responsible. And with that, I just want to say thank you to all of you, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for at least attempting to listen to our questions. I do want to point out, though, I did like your first, when we did our budget cycle, when your first year as the mayor, I really loved that. I know it was kind of hard to do this year. Your budget, you took your budget conversations around the city and you included residents in the conversations, and I hope you will do that in the future as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Core, I can tell you 100%. I missed that part of this process more than anything, and we will definitely do that again. Councilmember Fincher, followed by Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just also want to thank everybody who participated, by whether it be by letter, by calling in, but that's what the city is. The city wants to hear the voices and needs to hear all sides. There are different opinions on the council. We represent a city where people have different opinions. But one thing that we did strive to do was to come up with a budget that was going to work for equity and work for the people of Kent, all of the people of Kent. So I just wanted to be sure that I hope that that continues. I think I heard back from the 442 group, and several of us have contacted them and will be meeting with them. But all of the people who wrote in, no matter what your say was, whether it was to thank us for a sports program out of Kent Parks, or whether it was to give us your opinion to defund or not to defund, I concur with, there's no correlation between a large city and a large police department, rather a safe city and a large police department. But I do believe that in working to have a strong police department, that it is strong communities have strong police departments, not necessarily large police departments. We do not have a large police department. And I just could not see my way clear to decreasing the number of police we have. We're at just about where Seattle was asked to go with decreasing their numbers. I also checked around the country with a number of other cities, and several of those had 3 and 4 times the number of officers that we had serving the same number of people. So none of us got exactly what we wanted out of this budget, but I think we came up with a very good compromise, and this budget will definitely address equity. And there are members here to make sure that it does address equity. The plan may not be written, or rather the job description for the equity manager, but several of us have definite ideas about what that equity manager's role would entail. So it's not like it's just willy-nilly out there. There are definite plans to be put in place to help ensure equity in this city, that's the road that we are driving down, working toward. So again, thank you, and please stay involved. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to say pretty much, I think what my colleagues have already expressed is that, thank you to staff and to Mayor and CAO for all the answering all the questions. And this, this wasn't budgets are never easy. This was probably a more difficult one. There was a lot of questions and a lot of back and forth. But I feel really good about where we've landed. And I think my colleagues were working together. We all came into this with objectives. And I think, it came from every one of us had ideas on how to meet and get out of this budget what we needed. And so I'm really proud of what we've done. Youth mental health funding was super important, and we've committed to that. We've committed to transparent police data. We've put money behind our words in those areas, and so I believe this is a good compromise, and I'm pleased with where we've landed. And I think, as has been expressed before me, this is just the beginning of the conversations. These budgets go on for months. They take years to develop, and I think we have a lot of learnings that we can put towards the future budget cycles and the mid budget adjustments as well. So I think this has been a really great learning process for all of us, and really pleased to support this tonight.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Thomas.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor, once again. And I want to reflect some of the same thoughts that my colleagues have. It's been a bit challenging. I've been on the council now, 17 years, and gone through probably 10 budgets. This one was going to be a little bit tough, but it turned out to be really good, and because of compromise. It's really civics in action. And to my 442 group that mentioned some of the things earlier, this is the way you get things done. You don't always get your way, but you get some way. And as you move through the process, you become more and more aware that you need to begin this process much earlier than on the 11th hour to bring your demands to a council. So start earlier, get your concerns brought before the council members, like Councilmember Coulier said that, hey, she's willing to listen. She's going to take emails from you. That's terrific. I'm sure that if you have the same thing I have in front of me as a picture of each of the council members, and you'll notice that we are probably the most diverse council in King County, if not one of them anyway. And so we all have our own ideas. And I think that was what was really great. The mayor brought forth her budget. Then several members of the council had some serious thoughts about what they'd like to see. And we incorporated all that, came up with a pretty good budget that I'm proud of too. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I just want to first say, hey, Councilmember, I just want to say I'm very proud of you. Thank you for working through this process. I think we learned a lot on the way. First, I want to talk about, defunding the police. To me, it's not about defunding the police. It's about accountability. And I know our police chief, and being on the council, I've seen several examples of police who was not meeting the standards of the Kent Police Department, who are no longer part of the Kent Police Department. So accountability is what we want within our police department. When you talk about our police department, you look at the per population, we should have 190 police officers. Well, we only have about 160, right? And then if you say defund them and cut them in half, that means we'll have 80 police officers, right? And then we have 3 shifts. So that means we're roughly 26, 27 police officers per shift for the 6th largest city in the state, for the one of the most diverse city in the country. I mean, that just doesn't add up. So I think I'm all about accountability, and I think this council member is about accountability, making sure that the police chief hold his police officers accountable as the mayor hold her staff accountability. And I think that's how we're going to move this forward, holding each other accountable. So I do want to clear one thing up, by serving on the school board for 16 years, I want to make it clear that the city have no say-so over the school. They're entirely 2 different entities, right? So whatever the school side to do with the SRO or their process, that belongs to the school. We as a city have no say-so. And the last thing I want to point out, I think Councilmember Thomas hit on this a little bit. When we started this year budget process, a lot of our council members really pushed to have the co-responder. So there's there's money in the budget for the co-responder. There's money in the budget for youth. There's money in the budget for human services. So we listen to you, and it may not be exactly what you want, but I think there's some things that we have in this budget that it can make it a workable situation for the city of Kent. So once again, Councilmember, thank you for all of your hard work. You guys did a phenomenal job. And Mayor, thank you for your leadership as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce. All right, I don't see any other hands raised. We have a motion and a second on the table for the adoption of the 2021-2022 Biennial Budget. At this point, I will call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. I want to say thank you so much to the council for all of your work. Thank you for passing the presented budget, and thank you for your very thoughtful additions to this budget. We had an extremely robust process. The number of thoughtful questions that council brought forward is to be commended. It shows the engagement and it's definite evidence to me that we're all listening to the community. We've had a significant amount of input, and I do believe, as Councilmember Boyce summed it up, that while it's not the model that everyone might be asking for, I do believe the issues and the concerns of the community have been addressed in a thoughtful way. I want to say thank you so much to Paula and Michelle and our whole finance team for the work that they've done. We've done 2 full budget processes in the last 6 months, or less than that, if you think about the cuts that we had to make during COVID. So I am extremely grateful, and I want to say thank you to all of our department directors for presenting budgets that were responsive to the needs of their departments, but more importantly, responsive to the needs of the community, and making sure that the city has the ability to serve our community. Finally, I want to say thank you to our CAO, Derek Matheson. He is the ringleader, the herder of the cats, all of those things, however you want to put it, that has managed all of council's questions, all of staff's responses, and our process and procedure. And I think more often than should be the unsung hero in so much of the work that is done here. So heartfelt thanks. Thank you again to the council for your support in this budget. Like I said, the thoughtful additions, I wholeheartedly support every single one of them. You guys have done an amazing job, and I do believe this budget really does reflect our community. So with that, thank you very, very much. Councilmember Fincher, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I was thinking about what I said. I just wanted to clarify. When I said strong police department, I wasn't talking about strong as in force. I was talking about strong as in having co-responders, having youth programs. People are knowing your community. So strong police department in that way, not as in a force way. So a strong city has a strong police department who is actually a part of the community. That's what I wanted to make clear.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, we are going to move on to the added item on the agenda, which is the food delivery service cap. Just some really quick background. On Saturday afternoon, as we were getting word from the governor's office that he was going to be making an announcement on Sunday that would once again be shutting down our restaurants, I really started to think a lot about what we could do as a city to help support what are most always small businesses in our community. And one of the things that has come out through COVID is people using food delivery services to be able to continue to support their local restaurants, right? We talked a little bit earlier about supporting small business. And one of the things that came to mind was something we've seen other cities around our region do, and that is a cap on food delivery services. We've seen in some cases 2 and 3 and 4 times increase during COVID in what's being charged to our small businesses, to our restaurants. And so I reached out to our city attorney Economic and Community Development Director, and they were able to pull this information together, and I'm asking for council's consideration on this tonight as a way to show support for those businesses in Kent that are helping keep us all fed and our residents employed. There's a lot of jobs involved in our restaurants here in the city of Kent. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat Fitzpatrick, our city attorney, for the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Council President, and Council. I'm going to go through some of the background real quick, and then we'll talk about what the effect of the ordinance is. So, as we're all aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit the restaurant industry particularly hard. And the National Restaurant Association indicated that 1 in 6 restaurants in the nation closed permanently or on a long-term basis within the first 6 months of the pandemic. And that resulted in the loss of over 3 million restaurant worker jobs. Restaurant profit margins are typically quite low. They typically run in the range of 3 to 5%. Of course, they can be higher and they can be lower, but that's typically the range they operate in. So with that background, now we have the web-based food delivery services, and this has been an exploding market for some time. We're talking about businesses such as Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash, and there are a few others out there. These models are very convenient for customers because they can bring you good restaurant food directly to your home, but they also are they've been very good for restaurants. Restaurants typically that did not have any ability for delivery service were limited to who they could serve in their restaurant. And so with the advent of these type of businesses, it expanded the potential for a lot of restaurants out there. These app or web-based delivery services are doing really, really well financially. It's pretty amazing when I was doing the research today. In August of this year, Uber Eats reported 103% year-over-year revenue increase in its delivery service during the second quarter of 2020. So that would be right at the start of the COVID pandemic. And Grubhub reported for their third quarter of this year, $494 million profit. So these businesses, I think COVID-19 has been a boon for them. And at the same time, it has created a situation where restaurants who might be forced to close during a closure could still operate and serve the public. So there is, that's the upside of this. The way that these foods delivery services earn money is there's a number of different ways. They charge the business a commission. They can charge the customer a delivery fee. They typically will charge the restaurant a fee to utilize their app. And they also charge a positioning fee, which is the more the restaurant's willing to pay, the more prominent the restaurant will be displayed through the app. So, and these delivery services usually use a combination of those types of charges to make up their revenue. In February of 2020, the New York Times did a not so scientific, but seems very logical to me. They did a study where they ordered the same restaurant menu item and had it delivered to the same location using 3 or 4 different of these delivery services. And the increase in costs ultimately of the charge was anywhere from 37 to 49% greater than if the person would have walked into the store or into the restaurant to buy the food. And so because all of these delivery app services have a different model of generating revenue, it's kind of hard to pinpoint how much of that cost exactly falls on each restaurant, but it's reportedly quite high. And so to address these issues, many cities have been turning to this, basically what is a cap on the delivery fee. And I'm just going to give you some examples here. New York City was one of the first, and they have imposed a 20% cap, as has Westchester County in New York and the whole state of New Jersey. The the legislature passed a law there, and the cap there is 20%. And then there's a 15% range, which appears to be by far, far and above the greatest cap limit that's been imposed. And some examples are Seattle, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, Denver, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. And then Bothell is considering almost an exact ordinance that you're considering tonight, just as you are. And it's anticipated that that will pass in Bothell as well. And then there's a lesser fee. Portland is an outlier. They cap the revenue generated by these app services at 10% per order. So 15% seems to be the most common cap limit that cities have imposed. And another thing I want to mention is that in a lot of these bigger cities, Kent is a relatively small player compared to the cities that I listed off there, San Francisco and Los Angeles and whatnot. These service providers have attended these the meetings where those laws were passed, and so they are well aware of this. Well aware of this, and this is definitely a trending issue around the nation right now. So that's the background. And the idea here is that by providing a cap to these services, we're both allowing the delivery service to make a profit and to continue to be utilized by the restaurant business. And we're also not pricing the business out of this. Business profit margin is so small that if they are charged too much by these delivery services, they're cutting into that profit and they just aren't going to survive. And that has been resounding the basic call of the restaurant industry on this issue. So you have before you an ordinance, and there's a couple of key issues about the ordinance. First off, like I noted, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hold on one second. Councilmember Boyce has raised his hand. Do you want to ask Pat a question on that first part, or do you want to wait until he's done presenting?
I wait till he's done. He might tell me what I need, so I'll wait, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Pat.
No problem. So this ordinance will create a 15% cap for the third-party app-based delivery service that they can charge to the restaurant. The other thing it does is we want to make sure that the business app businesses don't turn around and then try to pull the profit from their drivers, because we have a lot of drivers who've been moving into this industry. A lot of people in this community have lost their job, and so we don't want their income and their income to be reduced and make this a situation where this isn't a productive job for them. So those are the two main things it does. It also creates a penalty for a violation, would be a $500 fine. Two things about the ordinance that are really key here. The first one is this is being presented to you as an emergency ordinance, and as an emergency, it allows us to make this effective literally the minute you pass it. We're not proposing you do that. We're proposing that the ordinance become effective at 12 a.m. on Saturday morning to give a few days for an adjustment period for the businesses. The other thing the ordinance does is it has an automatic sunset or repealer, so that when the COVID-19 pandemic starts to ease up and the governor allows people to return to restaurants at 75% capacity or more, then this ordinance evaporates, it goes away. The other thing is, in the event that the state were to pass an ordinance or the state legislature were to pass a statute, or the governor were to issue a proclamation limiting the profit, this ordinance would terminate, so that there is an even playing field across the entire state, or at least county. I can tell you that, like I said, Bothell is considering this tonight. My understanding is that Redmond, Bellevue, and Burien are also considering this type of move in the very near future as well. So that's my presentation. I'm here for questions.
All right, Councilmember Boyce, followed by Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pat, thank you for the presentation. This is something I strongly support. I do know of one incident where there was an order for food and it cost more to deliver than what they paid for the food. So I guess my question to either Madam Mayor or Pat, for our surrounding city, do you know what the direction are they moving? Have you had any conversation with them?
Mayor, I'm going to defer to you mostly on this. I only know for certain that Bellevue is addressing this issue as we speak.
I'm talking about the...
But right around Renton, Auburn, yeah, I'm going to have to defer to the mayor on that.
So Burien, I know, is considering this. They actually issued or passed a resolution quite some time ago regarding this, and I think they're looking at it. I don't know about Auburn or Renton, to be honest with you. I've not heard that. I think what we're seeing with especially the east side cities and Burien is really a reaction to this second wave of closing. We heard from so many businesses the first time that they could maybe hang on, and with this second round of closures, especially in the wintertime, it becomes even more important to support them. So, but I don't know that Auburn or Renton that I've heard of are considering, but I don't know that they're not either.
Madam, I guess I would ask, if you don't mind, I mean, 'cause I think it's a region issue. I think about South King County, maybe having a conversation with Federal Way, Auburn, Renton, Kent, and Auburn, Renton, and Federal Way, just see where they thought around this. It is a South King County. It'll be nice if we all could be on the same page. So
absolutely, I will reach out tomorrow, council member, and let you know. I do know that there is conversation around something happening statewide. I just don't have any indication as to when that will occur.
Thank you.
Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Pat, for the presentation, and thank you, Mayor and Derek, for bringing this forward. I think it's super important. One of the things that I love most about Kent is our small restaurants and how diverse they are. So I think that this is very important. My question for Pat, and something for my fellow council members to think about, depending on what he says, is I'm wondering why this ordinance would have an automatic sunset.
So when I draft something that's kind of a staff-generated issue that we don't have an opportunity to talk to council about before drafting, I try to weigh the pros and cons of what we're doing. I try to weigh the risks and the benefits to it. And I figured that an automatic sunset would allow, it would, first off, the council can come back at any time before or after that sunset and amend the ordinance. And this is, you'll notice that this is not codified. There isn't a code number, because it's anticipated that it will go away at some point, hopefully when this whole COVID thing ends, right? But that doesn't prohibit the council from taking permanent action in this. And I can tell you there is talk in other larger cities about some kind of cost control permanently on some of these types of businesses. So this was just my attempt at balancing an immediate need with a long-term impact.
Mayor, can I follow up?
Absolutely.
So I would just say to my fellow council members that I would support doing this as a permanent thing.
Pat, what would that process look like? Would it make more sense to pass the ordinance as written and then do some work on it down the road, or would it make more sense to make those changes right now?
My opinion is that we're acting so quickly. I mean, we literally started drafting this yesterday afternoon, right? My recommendation would be to pass this as it is, and that would give staff my gut, I hate to think this way, but my gut says that we're not going to reach that 75% capacity in the next month or two. You know, administration could ask staff to do a deeper dive into this, to go out there and meet with our restaurant community and try to get the response of some of these delivery services and have a much fuller picture of what we're dealing with on a long-term basis on this. So my recommendation would be pass it as is and direct staff to come back at a later time with some type of amendment that we would codify, if that's the direction that council wants to go.
Okay, Councilmember Michaud, any follow-up on that? Okay, Councilmember Boyce.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I kind of agree with Councilmember Michaud. I would say that once we get it at 75% and before automatic sunset, I think it should come back to the council for a conversation. I think that's the best way to handle it, right? So when we get to that 75%, bring it back to the council, let us have a discussion, and then that way we can make a decision from there. And I think the way you have it now is okay. My only caveat would be once we get to that threshold, bring it back and let us have a conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Thomas, followed by Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, Pat, I find yours ordinance here to be very creative and saving a lot of time, actually. And Mr. Boyce, when you, if you were to reach that 75% threshold, it's automatic. It's done. You don't have to bring it back to the council for discussion and slow things down. I just thought you did a good job on this, Pat, and I would support it as is.
Okay. Councilmember Larmer.
Yeah, so I think what we're all saying is that we support it as it is tonight. We would like the opportunity to look at it again when we reach that 75% for possible extension or possible codification.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right, Councilmember Fincher, followed by Councilmember Corr.
I was just going to lower my hand because that's what I was going to suggest, although I would like to hear back before the 75%. I would like to find out. And also, could we know how much of that goes to the driver? Did they increase the rates and the same percentage is going to the driver as before? Or is most of it going to the company? So I'd like to know that too.
Okay. And Councilmember Corr, your hand is down. Did you still have a question?
I was just going to repeat what everybody else has said. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I 100% am hearing that council would like to have this come back before we reach that 75% mark with an answer to some very specific questions. So I think that there's not a problem at all in committing to that. Any additional questions before we call for a motion? All right, is there a motion regarding the item number 9B, food delivery service fee caps?
Kim, may I have ordinance number, please? Thank you. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt ordinance number 4382, restricting restaurant delivery and pickup fees charged by third party, application-based food delivery platforms, and prohibiting reductions in compensation rates paid to delivery drivers.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much, Council, for sending a strong message to all of our restaurants in Kent that we support them and want to make sure we do everything we can to help them get through this extremely difficult time and help them support their employees as well. When we were talking with the governor's office on Saturday, one of the questions I asked was what the impact on jobs was going to be, and they had a number of somewhere near 300,000 in the state, and that was devastating to me. The idea that we're looking at that many people being and that's in addition to where we're already at. So I believe this goes a long ways in showing our business community that we support them. I only wish there were opportunities for all of the other businesses, our gyms and theaters and all of those places to support them. So thank you very, very much for taking this action. I am grateful, as is I'm sure our business owners. With that, we have no bids this evening, and we do not have an executive session. Thank you again, Council, for all of the work that you have put in and the support for the community over this many, many weeks. I'm proud to be a resident of Kent. I just want to say thank you all so much. We will close with the reminder, everybody put your masks on, take care of each other, reach out to somebody that you haven't heard from, make sure you're checking in. This is an overwhelmingly stressful time for everyone, and we just want to make sure that we're doing our best to support each other. And I think it's worth saying one more time, put your mask on. It's the only way we're going to get out of this. So thank you all. Have a wonderful evening and a happy Thanksgiving. We will not see each other between now and Thanksgiving. So lots to be thankful for sure. And I think it's important that that's what we focus on at this point. So with that, we are adjourned.
Good night.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Good night.